World War II was at its climax. The thunderous might of the Sturmgewehr echoed across the battlegrounds, terrifying the Allied forces. They had to re-strategize their stance on infantrymen due to STG-44 deadliness and new design. As the warfare intensified, Germany rapidly deployed greater numbers of those ambitious firearms to counter the advancing Allied armies, in spite of its limited range and different shortcomings. As a result, the German army recognized the need for a weapon that might suit the firepower and versatility of Allied forces. Before the arrival of the wanted weapon and the revolution it introduced to warfare, the German military normally depended on methods like blitzkrieg, which emphasized speedy and coordinated movement of infantry, tanks, and air support to crush and outmaneuver enemy forces. This strategy became exceedingly effective throughout the early stages of World War II, permitting the Germans to triumph speedily over large swaths of territory in Europe. However, their reliance on bolt-action rifles limited the effectiveness of their infantry in close combat, particularly while dealing with enemies equipped with submachine guns or automated rifles. Bolt-action rifles required soldiers to manually cycle the bolt after each shot, slowing down their rate of fire and making it tough to interact with more than one objective quickly. This difficulty became increasingly apparent as the war progressed and combat shifted to more urban and close-quarters environments. Recognizing the need for greater firepower and versatility, German commanders sought a weapon that could maintain their combat edge. But what are the bolt-action rifles? And why was there still a need for another weapon system despite the existence of bolt-action rifles? Let's rewind it to when bolt-action rifles were made and the revolution of other rifles after that. In 1836, a German named Johann Nachnedikolaus von Drais made a special rifle for the Prussian army called the Drais needle gun. It looked like older rifles, but had a new way of loading and firing. Instead of putting bullets in the front, you put them in the back with a bolt that you moved by hand. This made it shoot faster, about 6 bullets in a minute, and more accurately over longer distances. Many countries liked this idea and started making their own bolt-action rifles. These rifles were very famous, like the British Lee Enfield .303 and the American M1903 Springfield. They were great for the battles back then, where battles were largely fought at greater distances than they are today. During the Industrial Revolution, newer weapons were made, like the rapid-firing machine gun. In the Great War of 1914, soldiers quickly saw how deadly these guns were. Before, they would march into battle wearing their blue tunics, but now they had to rethink their tactics because machine guns could mow them down. So they started digging trenches to protect themselves, making it hard for enemies to attack. Even if a soldier managed to cross the dangerous area between trenches, he could only shoot a couple of times before getting shot back. So they knew they needed better guns for soldiers to fight with. That's how the submachine gun was invented, a small, fast-shooting weapon that used pistol bullets. In the last part of the war, the German army made special soldiers called stormtroopers. They had the MP-18 submachine guns and used them really well to attack Allied positions. But these guns had a big problem. They couldn't shoot very far, unlike the rifles used by the Allies. So, after the war, militaries didn't use them much, only for certain situations. As they stuck with the tried and tested bolt-action rifles, they kept using the old bolt-action rifles, which hadn't changed much since World War I. Even before the Great War, some were thinking about how to make rifles shoot faster, like machine guns. Soren H. Bang from Denmark invented a rifle that used gas from firing one round to reload the next round automatically. But Bang's rifles didn't work well, so they weren't used much. Later, though, his idea was improved and made some early automatic rifles using similar technology. Big adjustments were made when semi-automatic rifles were delivered, like the US M1 Garand rifle, commencing in 1937. Unlike older rifles, these rifles only fired one shot while you pulled the trigger. However, they routinely reloaded for the next shot using gas from the previous one. These meant that soldiers could shoot much quicker, as much as 60 rounds in a minute in comparison to 15 with the rifles that came before. It gave the U.S. a big advantage in the early days of World War II. When World War II began, people thought it might be just like its predecessor, with massive armies combating in trenches. But things had changed. Tanks and airplanes were now more important, making trench warfare old-fashioned. Instead, battles were more mobile. The Germans, always open to new ideas, started thinking about what soldiers needed in this new kind of war. When Germany invaded Poland in 1939, their main rifle was the Karabiner 98K, a bolt-action rifle. After examining how the warfare was evolving, the Germans realized that most of the fighting was at closer distances, about 400 meters. What this meant was that they needed to rethink their strategy and equip their soldiers with a weapon that would bridge the gap between rifle and submachine gun, whereby it would give the best of both worlds, the accuracy of a rifle and firepower of a submachine gun. While the Kar-98K still had a place on the battlefield, it was clear that as more battles were fought in cities and small towns at closer distances, it necessitated this new style of weapon. They found that submachine guns, like the MP40, were easier to use but didn't shoot far enough, and the bullets weren't strong enough. At close and even medium ranges, bolt-action rifles were just too slow for follow-up shots when soldiers were in a target-rich environment, not to mention too long to maneuver in close-quarter combat, such as houses and even narrow streets. So the German engineers had a big challenge: make a gun that could shoot fast like a submachine gun, hit hard like a rifle, shoot far enough for close combat, and be easy to use in any situation. If they could do that, it would revolutionize how guns were made. They tried to figure out how to make the bullets shoot faster, but the ones they had were too strong for automatic fire. This made it hard for soldiers to aim the gun properly in situations that required rapid shooting. The chief designer at the Heinel Company, Hugo Schmeisser, thought he had the answer: a shorter bullet called the 7.92 by 33 mm Kurz round, powered by gas. He also added a feature that let soldiers switch between shooting one bullet at a time or shooting continuously, depending on what they needed. Schmeisser made this new gun, the machine carbine or MKB-42, in 1942 and gave it to soldiers in Russia. They liked it a lot, saying it was strong and worked well, which led Schmeisser to improve it even more. But there was a big problem. When Hitler was briefed about the weapon in 1943, he didn't approve it for mass product. This was due to numerous factors. He and his advisors, many of which were soldiers from past wars, thought the smaller bullet wouldn't be as effective as the larger ones used in older rifles. Furthermore, Hitler favored canceling it because of the added strain that the Kurz round would place on production, and committed to standard 7.9 mm rifle rounds, already stockpiled in the millions. Schmeisser and others who liked the new gun tried to argue, but in March 1943, Hitler said to stop working on it. But Schmeisser and his team thought the new gun could aid them to win the war. So, they kept working on it secretly by pretending to improve another gun, the MP40. They changed the MKB-42 to make the MP-43, which they made in small numbers. They even gave it to Hitler's bodyguards, so he saw them every day, hoping he'd start to like the new gun and let everyone use it. By the fall of 1943, the supporters of the new gun felt confident enough to ask Hitler again to use it everywhere. The situation in the East, especially, helped their case. German soldiers with old rifles were often outnumbered by Soviet soldiers with powerful submachine guns. The German soldiers could shoot some Soviets from far away, but the decreased rate of fire coupled with so many Soviets attacking them at once meant that they were increasingly coming outmatched and outgunned. But soldiers with the new MKB-42S and MP-43S said they could fight back better. These guns acted like machine guns, shooting lots of bullets at pace and with precision. They were also good for fighting at close quarters. Hitler finally agreed to use the new gun, but he didn't like its name, MP-44. He thought it needed a new name to show how special it was. So he called it the Sturmgewehr, or assault rifle. As the war raged on, Adolf Hitler's personal involvement played a pivotal role. Although he did not like it at first, afterward, he recognized the need for a new type of firearm that could address the realities of combat on the Eastern Front. His decisions and directives significantly shaped the course of the project, influencing its design and strategic implications. He wanted a gun that could be as powerful as a machine gun, with maneuverability, and be easy to use, like a rifle. So, German designers, notably Hugo Schmeisser, later Hugo Sturmgewehr, made a new weapon called the Sturmgewehr 44. The STG-44 was a game-changer for German soldiers. It was accurate like a rifle, but fired rapidly like a submachine gun. The STG-44 was like no other gun. It had a bullet that was not too big but not too small. This helped German troops shoot a lot while staying on the move, giving them a big edge against enemies with slower guns. Its impact on the battlefield was huge, making it famous and feared by everyone. The STG-44, additionally called the Assault Rifle 44 or Storm Rifle, changed into a combination of a submachine gun and an automated rifle. It could shoot like an MP-40 machine gun up close and like a Karabiner 98 rifle from farther away. Adolf Hitler himself came up with the name for it. Even though they could not replace the Karabiner 98K rifle, tests in 1943 showed the Sturmgewehr was good, so they started making lots of them by October 1943. Soldiers on the Eastern Front got the first ones, and soon more units got them too. They started making them, sending the first ones to the Eastern Front. By the end of the war, a total of 425,977 STG-44 variants were produced. Its success was particularly notable on the Eastern Front. These new rifles were great because they could be used from far away or up close, like a small machine gun. The technical specifications of the STG-44 further illustrate why it was considered a versatile and effective weapon. For instance, if we talk about its caliber, the STG-44 fired the 7.92 by 33 mm Kurz cartridge. The choice of this intermediate round aimed to balance power and recoil. It was more potent than pistol cartridges, but less powerful than full-sized rifle rounds. With an overall length of about 94 centimeters or 37 inches, the STG-44 boasted a compact design, making it well suited for engagements at close to medium ranges. Furthermore, the STG-44 operated using a gas-operated long-stroke piston mechanism. Gas from the fired cartridge drove the piston, cycling the action and chambering the next round. The STG-44 featured a 42 centimeter, 16.5 inches barrel. Because of this, the shorter barrel contributed to its maneuverability in tight spaces. The most impressive trait of this weapon is that it can achieve a rate of fire of 500 rounds per minute. The selective fire capability allowed both semi-automatic and automatic modes. Despite its robust construction, weighing 4.6 kilograms without ammunition, it remained manageable for infantry use, serving as the precursor to the modern assault rifle. Its innovative features set the stage for subsequent developments in infantry firearms, influencing designs that followed after the war. Late in the war, its founder introduced a unique accessory to bolster the STG's effectiveness at close range. This was the Krumlauf, an accessory with curved barrels used by soldiers. It had a periscope that allowed soldiers to aim the gun without being seen or exposed to the enemies. It came in two variants, one meant to be used by the infantry and another for tankers. The curved barrel came in 30, 45, 60, and 90-degree bends. it allowed firing from behind cover. Although the curved barrel gun was useful, it did not last long. The Krumlov had a very short use time during the war. It was an unusual gun design that solved a problem, but better weapons replaced it quickly. The 30-degree version had a life cycle of no more than 300 rounds. This number plummeted with each increment in angle. For example, the 60-degree version had a life cycle of just over 200 rounds. The angle produced great stress on the barrel and the round, sometimes resulting in the bullets shattering and exiting in fragments with a shotgun effect. Some STGs were also armed with telescopic sights used with the FG-42 and Gewehr 43 to maximize the accuracy of soldiers engaging forces at ranges past 200 meters. Another attachment was the Vampir, or the Zielgerät, 1229 infrared aiming device. This unique device consisted of a large scope and a large infrared lamp on the top to pick up the infrared that human eyes could not see in the darkness. It had a range of over 200 meters and was powered by a battery the soldier carried in a transformer backpack that only provided 15 minutes of battery life. When using the Vampir, the soldier had to use his rifle with a conical flash hider to prevent the muzzle flash from blinding him when firing. The STG-44 changed the whole scenario about how soldiers fought in World War II. Its special bullets were stronger than those in small guns, but not as heavy as those in big rifles. In battles, the STG-44 worked really well. Soldiers could shoot short bursts accurately, which helped them hit more targets and keep enemies down. But the Allies had bombed German factories, so there weren't many STGs produced. This was seen in the tough fighting in Berlin in 1945, where German soldiers with STG-44s fought hard against the Soviets. The gun could also shoot in different ways, like one shot at a time or lots of shots quickly. This made it useful for different situations, like saving bullets when shooting far away or firing fast when up close. Plus, it was easy to hold and not too heavy, so soldiers could move around quickly, especially in cities where space was tight. Soldiers liked it for close combat because it helped them shoot a lot and keep enemies down. During the Ardennes offensive, 2 German paratrooper divisions had very different losses. The 5th Division lost nearly 9,000 men, while the 3rd Division lost only around 2,500. Why? Both fought the same U.S. forces, but the 3rd Division had more STGs. It would be best to say that the Sturmgewehr was a game changer in how soldiers fought, with its mix of power, control, and flexibility, shaping how wars were fought for a long time. As mentioned earlier, there were not many STGs produced. But why? What were the challenges that affected its development? Firstly, getting the materials needed to make the STG-44 was hard. The rifle used an extraordinary type of bullet called the 7.92 x 33mm Kurz cartridge. But with the war going on, keeping the bullets in stock was tough because of shortages and disruptions. Secondly, making a new rifle like the STG-44 required skilled workers. But many of these skilled workers were either in the army or working on other important things because of the war, so there weren't enough people to build the rifles. Then, there were problems with organizing everything. Making sure all the parts were in the right place, moving things around, and getting the rifles to the soldiers was tricky because the war messed up the roads and trains. Also, at first, Hitler wasn't sure about the STG-44. He didn't think the new bullet it used was needed, so he didn't want to make too many of them. But when soldiers started liking the rifle, he changed his mind. Lastly, Germany had to decide where to put its resources. Making the STG-44 meant using materials and workers that could be used for other important things. So, they had to think carefully about what to prioritize. Despite all these problems, German factories made a total of 425,977 STG-44 rifles by the end of the war. In 1944, the MP-44 was called the new German automatic carbine by the Americans. The first American report, An intelligence bulletin from September 1944 noted that German orders forbade troops from using the automatic firing setting due to overheating. The intelligence bulletin mentioned that the MP-44 was twice as heavy as the M1 carbine and had no apparent advantage except for slightly higher muzzle velocity. Comparisons between the MP-44 and the M1 carbine were not favorable for the German weapon. In a battle experience report from January 1945, it was noted that the MP-44 produced a considerable volume of fire but was inaccurate and lacked range compared to the M1 carbine. However, some reports contained inaccuracies, such as the Soviet report that incorrectly stated the magazine's capacity. A German report from the 563rd Grenadier Division trials indicated that the MP-44 had superior precision to the Model 98K rifle at ranges up to 500 meters when firing single shots. Even experienced shooters performed better with the MP-44 than the rifle. One of the primary uses for the STG-44 was to counter the Soviet submachine guns. Although the STG-44 lacked the range of the Kar-98K, it could still be used to shoot over longer distances when compared to the Soviet submachine guns. But that's not all. This new weapon had more power, and soldiers using it could switch between automatic and semi-automatic mode and shoot with great accuracy. As far as smashing the Allied forces is concerned, the STG-44 was issued to the 1st Infantry Division of Army Group South and the 32nd Infantry Division of Army Group North. The weapon was given to all infantry soldiers and was to be used for short-range shooting where rapid-fire combat techniques were required. In an attack scenario, the Kar-98K riflemen would partner up with those with the STG-44 and deploy grenades. At the same time, those with the STG-44 would fire rapid semi-automatic and automatic bursts, which kept the Allied forces suppressed. The newly developed weapon fired at such pace that soldiers were directed to use it in semi-automation mode to keep the barrel from bending. Due to its pace and precision, the weapon became a key component of their attack tactics, helping them smash the Allied forces. What set the STG-44 apart from the OG of assault rifles was its exceptional versatility. It could shoot lots of bullets really fast in full auto mode, or shoot one bullet at a time for accuracy. This made it great for all kinds of fighting, whether it was up close or far away. Its bullets were just right, not too powerful, not too weak, which made it super effective in battles. Now, let's evaluate it to different weapons of its time. The M1 Garand, a famous American rifle, boasted a powerful 30-06 round and semi-auto action, making it a force to be reckoned with in the fingers of skilled marksmen. But the STG-44 had the edge due to the fact it can shoot a group of bullets quickly, giving soldiers extra firepower. Then there's the Thompson submachine gun, known for its cool look and loud bullets. With its iconic appearance and roaring .45 ACP rounds, the Thompson was great for close combat. But it couldn't shoot far or as precisely as the STG-44. Lastly, the MP-40, a reliable gun utilized by the German military. It was accurate for near fights too. However, its bullets weren't as sturdy, and it couldn't switch between shooting modes like the STG-44 could. In the end, the STG-44 wasn't just any old gun, it changed how soldiers fought. Its influence can still be seen in modern rifles, making it a legend in the history of weapons. Despite being a relic of World War II, the Sturmgewehr 44's impact on modern warfare was far-reaching. How was this deadly weapon seen in the Syrian war? In 2012, rebels in Syria found a bunch of vintage guns known as Sturmgewehr 44s in a hidden stash. These guns were made by Nazi Germany at the time of World War II. However, now they have been displayed in warfare in the Middle East, which seemed peculiar. As we know, the Sturmgewehr 44 became special, as it was one of the first assault rifles ever made. Back then, most soldiers used big rifles or small submachine guns. But the Sturmgewehr 44 could shoot in ways like a rifle and rapidly like a submachine gun. During World War II, infantrymen mostly used longer rifles or small submachine guns. But the Sturmgewehr 44 became distinct due to the fact it is able to shoot in a way like a rifle and fast up close like a submachine gun. It became famous for this. Germany wanted a gun like this because they found that soldiers didn't usually shoot enemies from far away. They mostly fought at closer distances. So, they made the Sturmgewehr 44 using a special kind of bullet that could do both. The Germans also made some fancy versions with special features, like night vision scopes. After the war, other countries, like the Soviet Union, saw how useful these rifles were, and the world's most famous assault rifle, the AK-47, took inspiration from the STG-44. Fast forward to today, there are rebels in Syria using old guns like the STG-44. Back in 1964, East Germany secretly offered approximately 4,500 of those weapons, alongside bullets, to Syria. They additionally sold extra weapons, like tanks and submachine weapons, to Syria and Palestinian militant organizations. Other countries also sold old Nazi weapons to the Middle East. When World War II ended, Czechoslovakia, where Nazi Germany had forced people to work in factories, sold off the old Nazi guns. They even started making their own versions of these guns to use at home and to sell abroad. A special type of the famous Messerschmitt 109 plane was used by Israel during its early days. It helped stop an Egyptian attack on Tel Aviv, which was crucial for Israel's survival. Later on, the Czech Republic sold tanks and other weapons to Syria, including rifles. Syria still owed a lot of money for these deals by 1990. Eventually, Syria's guns ended up with rebel groups in 2012. These weapons were seen in photos and videos during Syria's conflicts, but by 2017, they became less common due to a shortage of bullets. That's how this powerful weapon got involved in the Syrian civil war. But its significance in the world of weapons remains, and its legacy continues. More than 420,000 STG-44 assault rifles and 822 million rounds were produced by the war's end. Although the rifle bolstered the combat effectiveness of the German soldier, it was never produced in large enough numbers to make a difference against the eventual Allied victory. Still, the first assault rifle ever developed left a big impression on the victors of World War II, leading to detailed evaluations of the STG-44 to create improved designs. Such was the case of the Soviet Avtomat Kalashnikova, or AK-47, introduced in 1949 to the Red Army. Like the STG-44, the AK also employed an intermediate cartridge and featured a similar gas operation principle and exterior design. It is no coincidence that Hugo Schmeisser, the STG's designer, and several of his team members were captured by the Red Army and forced to work with Kalashnikov after the war. During an interview from 2009 that commemorated Kalashnikov's 90th birthday, he admitted that he might have been helped by Hugo Schmeisser and his team when he designed the iconic Soviet rifle. Another recognizable assault rifle still used today, the M16, developed by Eugene Stoner, was also inspired by the German STG when he came up with the quintessential American assault rifle first introduced in the 1960s. Curiously enough, the AK-47 and the M16 served alongside the STG-44 during the Cold War. Thousands of captured STGs were used by the East German Army until they were gradually replaced by AKs in the late 60s. Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia also used STG-44s until the 1980s. More importantly, the Sturmgewehr found its way to Vietnam in 1945 when the French military sought to regain control of its former colony. French troops and units of the Foreign Legion were armed with STG-44s to fight the guerrillas. As the war dragged on until the 1970s, the Vietnamese Communist forces were also supplied by the Soviet Union with German assault rifles that remained in service until the American troops withdrew from East Asia. It was not uncommon for American GIs to take STGs as war trophies after defeating the enemy. Vietnam allowed the German assault rifle to earn its status as a legendary weapon due to its reliability 20 years after its introduction. Besides Indochina, the STG has also fought in war theaters of the 21st century, such as Iraq, Afghanistan, Algeria, and Libya, where it has been used by rebel forces since the Cold War ended. The Sturmgewehr's legacy lives on to this day with the same name that created a new type of rifle that has become the cornerstone of every single military force worldwide.